The cook saw a rat and jumped into the arms of a stranger. What she didn't know was that he was a disguised millionaire. The whole room stopped to witness the unbelievable scene, an impulsive gesture that would change her life forever. If this story interests you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. We'll continue. The steam from the pots rose in spirals as Jessica nervously adjusted her improvised bun, trying to keep her rebellious hair under control. At 26, recently promoted to sous chef at the renowned restaurant The Secret Garden, she still struggled to find her place in that universe of stainless steel and high expectations. "We need the mise en place for tonight's service in 20 minutes, she shouted, her voice echoing through the busy kitchen. The looks she received in response were a mixture of respect and doubt, the same doubt that sometimes consumed her during sleepless nights. The restaurant was her refuge and her battlefield. Each gleaming pot, each perfectly sharpened knife, told a story of dedication and perseverance. Jessica had started as a kitchen assistant 6 years ago, and her meteoric rise hadn't gone unnoticed, nor had it failed to cause some resentment. "Chef," the truffle supplier called. "There was a problem with the delivery," informed Peter, one of the more experienced cooks with a worried expression. Jessica felt her stomach sink. The truffles were essential for tonight's tasting menu. "How long until they resolve it?" she asked, maintaining her composure while her mind already calculated alternatives. Peter's response was interrupted by a sudden movement at the kitchen door. "Excuse me, I need to speak with the executive chef." A deep and melodious voice filled the room. Jessica turned to find a tall man, impeccably dressed in an Italian suit that seemed to have been sewn by angels. His eyes, an intense amber, caused an involuntary shiver down her spine. "The executive chef is in an important meeting," she responded automatically, trying not to get lost in that magnetic gaze. So, Chef Jessica, can I help you?" The elegant stranger studied her for a moment, a half-smile playing on his lips. "Perhaps you can," he replied enigmatically, his eyes scanning the kitchen with genuine interest. Jessica was about to question the reason for his visit when a quick movement in the corner of her vision paralyzed her. A small, chubby and bold mouse calmly crossed the kitchen floor. Her body reacted before her brain could process. With a sharp scream, she instinctively jumped backward. The world seemed to spin in slow motion as she lost her balance. Her back met not the cold floor but strong and secure arms. The woody perfume of the stranger invaded her senses as he supported her, preventing her fall. "Interesting way to receive visitors," he commented, with an amused tone that made Jessica's cheeks burn with embarrassment. The entire kitchen had stopped to watch the scene, and she could feel the curious gazes of her team. Regaining her composure, Jessica disentangled herself from the stranger's arms, adjusting her uniform with trembling fingers. "Sorry for the incident," she muttered, trying to recover her authority. "About your visit." "Don't worry," he interrupted her softly. "Actually, this was more interesting than any formal conversation could be." His amber eyes captured something beyond her, a small table in the corner of the kitchen, where an elaborate pie rested, still in the process of being finished. "Your creation?" he asked, approaching the dessert with genuine interest. Jessica felt her heart race. That pie was her secret project, something she worked on during her spare time, dreaming of a culinary competition that would happen soon. "Yes," she admitted, watching as he studied the details of the decoration with expert eyes. "It's a personal project." "Interesting," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Then, turning with a determined expression, he made a proposal that would change the course of her life. "How about presenting it at a charity event at the Grand Palace Hotel next weekend?" Jessica stared at the stranger with a mixture of surprise and distrust. The Grand Palace Hotel was the most prestigious establishment in the city, frequented only by the elite. How could she, a simple sous chef, present her creation in such an elegant place? "Excuse me, but I don't even know your name," she argued, trying to buy time while her mind processed the unexpected proposal. The man smiled, a smile that seemed to hold 1,000 secrets. "Ethan Sullivan," he answered simply, as if the name didn't carry the weight of decades of history in American gastronomy. Jessica felt her legs weaken. Ethan Sullivan was a living legend, owner of the largest fine dining restaurant network in the country. "Mr. Sullivan, she stammered, but he interrupted her with a gentle gesture. "Just Ethan, please. And before you refuse, let me explain the proposal better." At that moment, Peter appeared with news about the truffles, but Jessica could barely process the information. Her mind was focused on the man in front of her, who had just turned her world upside down. "I accept," she said suddenly, surprising herself. "But with one condition. If the result isn't satisfactory, I want to remain anonymous." Ethan raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Interesting. A chef who doesn't seek recognition at any cost. That's refreshing." His amber eyes shone with something that seemed like approval. On the morning of the event, a black limousine parked in front of Jessica's modest apartment. The driver, impeccable in his uniform, opened the door, revealing a luxurious interior. That made her heart race. On the Italian leather seat, a small card with Ethan's elegant handwriting awaited her. "Trust your talent as much as I trust it." The Grand Palace Hotel was even more impressive inside. Crystal chandeliers poured golden light over Italian marble, and the event hall was decorated with an elegance that Jessica had only seen in magazines. In the kitchen, prepared especially for the occasion, she found equipment from any chef's dreams. "Nervous?" Ethan's voice surprised her. He appeared silently beside her, watching as she organized her ingredients with military precision. "A little," she admitted, adjusting the arrangement of tools for the 1,000th time, but more determined than nervous. "Great," he smiled, "because there's something I need to tell you." Jessica stopped what she was doing, noticing a sudden seriousness in his voice. "This event isn't just for charity, it's also a secret selection for the biggest international gastronomy reality show." The world seemed to spin for a moment. Jessica grabbed the counter to steady herself, feeling the weight of that revelation. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she whispered, divided between panic and indignation. "Because I wanted you to accept for your own reasons, not for the promise of fame," he answered simply. "I observed your work for weeks before appearing at the secret garden. I saw how you treat your team, how you respect the ingredients, how you put your soul into every dish. You have something rare, Jessica, something that can't be taught." Tears threatened to escape, but she contained them. It wasn't the time for emotions. She had a pie to finish and a future to conquer. "And if I fail?" she asked, more to herself than to him. Ethan moved closer, his amber eyes fixed on hers. "Then you will have learned something valuable. But you know what else I learned watching you? That you don't fail, Jessica. You learn, adapt, evolve, and that's exactly what gastronomy needs." In the hall, animated voices indicated the arrival of the first guests. Jessica breathed deeply, tying her apron firmly. Among those present was the cream of world gastronomy, renowned critics, starred chefs, powerful influencers. Her little personal project was about to be judged by the most demanding palates on the planet. The aroma of Jessica's pie filled the Grand Palace Hotel kitchen, a symphony of fragrances that made the chefs present pause to admire. Her hands worked with surgical precision on the final details of the decoration, while her mind wandered between anxiety and determination. 10 minutes until presentation, announced one of the organizers, making her heart leap. From across the kitchen, she noticed sideways glances from some competitors, especially from Rebecca Hayes, a celebrated chef known for her difficult temperament. "Amateur," Rebecca whispered as she passed by, loud enough to be heard. "This event is no place for backyard experiments." Jessica breathed deeply, focusing on finalizing her dish. Ethan's words echoed in her mind, reminding her of her worth. The pie before her was more than a dessert. It was the materialization of sleepless nights, endless experiments, a passion that transcended petty criticism. "Your mise en place is impeccable," a soft voice commented. Jessica looked up to meet Sophia Laurent, the legendary French chef, observing her work with genuine interest. "How long have you been working with patisserie?" "I started at 16 at home," Jessica replied, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "My grandmother was a pastry chef." A noise of metal hitting the floor interrupted her speech. Rebecca had accidentally dropped a tray near Jessica's counter, startling her. For a terrible moment, she feared something had hit her pie, but the dessert remained intact. "Sorry," Rebecca smiled falsely. "Accidents happen in the best kitchens, don't they?" Sophia gave a disapproving look to the American chef before turning back to Jessica. "Continue your work, dear. I'll be attentive to your presentation." The main hall was packed when Jessica finally brought her creation to be judged. Famous faces from world gastronomy occupied the front rows, notebooks and phones in hand, ready to record every detail. Ethan was among them, his amber gaze transmitting silent confidence. "Our next participant," announced the presenter, "brings a contemporary reinterpretation of a traditional dessert. Please present your creation." Jessica positioned the pie in the center of the presentation table, her hands surprisingly steady. "This is a dark chocolate tart with salted caramel and hazelnut praline," she began, her voice gaining strength with each word. "The chocolate is tempered traditionally, but I incorporated modern techniques in the caramel structure, which has a texture that transforms in the mouth." The judges watched attentively as she cut the first slice, revealing perfectly defined layers. The silence in the hall was absolute, broken only by the soft clinking of cutlery. "Extraordinary," murmured the first judge after tasting. "The complexity of textures, the balance between sweet and salty. How long have you been developing this recipe?" 3 months, replied Jessica, feeling more confident. Each element was tested separately until finding the perfect harmony. Positive comments continued, each judge finding something new to praise. At the back of the hall, Rebecca observed with a sour expression, her fingers furiously typing on her phone. That was when the murmuring began. First, discreet whispers, then more audible comments. Jessica noticed some judges consulting their phones with concerned expressions. "Miss Jessica," called one of the organizers, his expression grave, "could you accompany us for a moment?" In an adjacent room, Jessica discovered the reason for the commotion. On a tablet screen, a post was going viral on social media. Photos of her supposedly copying recipes from other chefs, accompanied by serious accusations of culinary plagiarism. "This is a lie," she declared, feeling her blood freeze. "I can prove the development of the recipe. I have all the records." "Naturally, we will investigate all accusations," replied the organizer, his professional tone barely disguising the discomfort. "But you understand that this puts everyone in a delicate position." Jessica felt the world collapsing. Everything she had worked for was about to be destroyed by a lie. Through the half-open door, she saw Rebecca passing by, a satisfied smile on her lips. The clock on the wall seemed to move in slow motion as Jessica waited in the meeting room, her heart beating erratically. The plagiarism accusations were absurd, but the damage was already done. On social media, her reputation was being destroyed with each share. The door opened softly, and Ethan entered with a serene expression that contrasted with the chaos of the moment. In his hands, he carried a thick folder. "I knew something like this might happen," he declared, sitting across from her. "So, I prepared." Jessica stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "Look," he replied, opening the folder. Inside were dozens of photographs, records from the secret garden's security cameras, showing Jessica working alone in the early morning hours, developing and testing recipes. There were also detailed records of ingredient purchases, dated notes signed by suppliers. "But how?" she asked, flipping through the documents with trembling hands. "When I decided to bring you to this event, I researched everything about you. I saw your talent, your dedication, but I also noticed the envious looks, the sabotage attempts. So silently, I began gathering evidence of your originality." At that moment, Sophia Laurent entered the room, followed by 2 other judges. "My friends," she began, "we've just received interesting information about certain inconsistencies in the accusations." A series of compromising conversation screenshots appeared on the room's screen. Messages revealing an elaborate defamation scheme with Rebecca at the center of it all. "Miss Hayes is being asked to leave the event," announced one of the judges. And as for you, Jessica, your proof of originality is more than sufficient. But there's something else we need to discuss. Jessica felt the air leave her lungs when the judge continued. Your pie not only impressed the technical jury, but also captured the attention of some of the most important names in world gastronomy. We would like to offer you a unique opportunity. Sophia smiled, her eyes shining. My restaurant in New York is looking for new talents for a development program, 6 months of intensive training, working directly with me. The world seemed to stop. New York. Sophia Laurent's restaurant was one of the most prestigious in the world, with 3 Michelin stars and a months-long waiting list. Jessica began, but was interrupted by Ethan. Accept, he said softly. You deserve this. Your talent deserves this. There was something in his eyes, a mixture of pride and sadness that made Jessica's heart tighten. What about the reality? Joe? She asked, remembering the original reason for the event. Sometimes, replied Ethan, fate presents us with better paths than those we planned. The reality show would be momentary exposure. This, he gestured towards Sophia, is an opportunity to truly develop your talent. Jessica looked out the room's window, observing the city that had always been her home. The idea of leaving everything behind was frightening, but the promise of fulfilling her dream was even stronger. When would I need to leave? She asked Sophia, her voice firm despite the whirlwind of emotions. In 2 weeks, replied the French chef. Enough time to organize your life here and prepare for a new chapter in New York. Ethan stood up, straightening, his impeccable suit. I'll leave you to discuss the details, he said, walking toward the door. But before leaving, he turned one last time. Jessica, always remember that first day in the kitchen. Sometimes it's our most vulnerable moments that open doors to our greatest dreams. As she watched him leave, Jessica felt a certainty growing in her chest. Her life was about to change completely, and although fear was still present, the excitement for the approaching adventure was even greater. The grey, new York sky greeted Jessica with a fine, persistent drizzle. Her small apartment in Soho, arranged by Sophia, overlooked a charming cafe that was already exhaling tempting aromas in the early morning hours. 2 weeks had passed like a feverish dream since the event at the Grand Palace Hotel. Adjusting her scarf, Jessica crossed the cobblestone streets toward Le Soleil, Sophia Laurent's gastronomic temple. Her steps echoed on the sidewalk while her mind wandered to the farewell at the airport. Ethan hadn't appeared, and although she tried not to think about it, a pang of disappointment still tightened her chest. Good morning, little chef. Sophia's melodious voice greeted her at the back entrance of the restaurant. Ready for your first day? Jessica nodded, trying to control her nervousness. Le Soleil's kitchen was a spectacle of organization and technology. State-of-the-art. Equipment shared space with traditional utensils, some over a century old. Your station will be here, indicated Sophia, guiding her to an impeccable counter. Today you'll observe, learn our dynamics. Tomorrow you start creating. Le Soleil's team was a fascinating mixture of nationalities and styles. There was Pierre, the grumpy but genius chef de partie with sauces, Yuki, the sushi woman who had decided to venture into French cuisine, and Anthony, the young sous chef whose eyes seemed to follow Jessica with special interest. Miss Jessica, called Anthony during prep, I heard you created a pie that impressed even Madame Laurent. That's extraordinary. There was something in the way he spoke, a tone that Jessica couldn't completely decipher. Before she could respond, Sophia appeared with unexpected news. Jessica, dear, I need you in pastry today. Jacques is sick, and we have an important event tonight. The initial panic soon gave way to determination. Pastry was her territory, where she felt most secure. While working on the dough for a millefeuille, she noticed Anthony discreetly observing her, making notes in a small notebook. The hours flew by among creams, doughs, and caramels. The evening event was a dinner for food critics, and every detail needed to be perfect. Jessica was finishing a tower of profiteroles when her cell phone vibrated with a notification. It was a message from Peter, her former colleague from the secret garden. Jessica, you need to see this. Attached was a link to a report about Ethan Sullivan's restaurant chain. The headline made her heart stop. Gastronomic empire in crisis. Ethan Sullivan faces biggest challenge of his career. Her hands trembled as she read the details. A series of unsuccessful investments had left the network on the brink of collapse. Ethan was struggling to keep his restaurants running, facing creditors and critics who now questioned his competence. "Focus, little chef," Sophia's voice brought her back to reality. "I know it's difficult, but now you need to be here. Present." Jessica looked up, surprised. "You knew about Ethan?" Sophia sighed, sitting beside her. "Yes, he's an old friend. He was the one who suggested your name for the development program, you know. Said you had something special, something the New York market needed. But why didn't he tell me about the problems?" "Ah, my dear, some men prefer to fight their battles alone, especially those who built empires with their own hands." The rest of the day passed in a blur of intense activity. The critics arrived, tasted, praised. Jessica's profiteroles received special mentions, with one particularly enthusiastic critic declaring they were a revolution in classic French pastry. But while the team celebrated the night's success, Jessica noticed Anthony discreetly photographing her recipe notes. A chill ran down her spine. There was something familiar about that scene, something that reminded her of the days preceding the plagiarism accusations. Back in her apartment, exhausted but restless, Jessica opened her recipe notebook. Between the pages, she found a card she hadn't noticed before, left there by Sophia. "Remember, little chef, that in cooking, as in life, the greatest challenges often bring the sweetest rewards." The New York morning brought with it a disturbing revelation. At the entrance of Le Soleil, posters announced a new gastronomy reality show, The New Chef, featuring Anthony as one of the main judges. The promotional photos showed him preparing desserts strangely familiar to Jessica. "Impossible," she murmured, recognizing her own creations in the images. Her fingers trembled as she typed a message to Sophia, who was at a food fair in Boston. "My dear, I'll be back this afternoon." "Don't do anything hasty," was the immediate response from the chef. The kitchen was buzzing with preparations for lunch when Anthony entered, emanating a different confidence. "Ah, Jessica, saw the posters? Exciting, no? Perhaps we could collaborate in the future." The condescending tone in his voice made Jessica's blood boil, but years of discipline in the kitchen had taught her to maintain her composure. "Collaborate? How exactly do you suggest that, Anthony?" "Well, your concepts are interesting, but they need refinement. Someone with more experience in the American market could help adapt them to the local palate." Jessica tasted the bitter irony. It was the same tactic Rebecca had tried, but now more sophisticated, more subtle. "Interesting proposal," she replied, keeping her voice calm while discreetly reaching for her phone. The recording began silently as Anthony continued, increasingly confident in his plan. "Think about it, Jessica. You're talented, but you're a newcomer here. You need strong alliances to survive in the American market." "Like the recipes you photographed without my permission?" she asked, watching him slightly pale. "I don't know what you're talking about," he replied, but his nervous gaze betrayed him. "Anthony!" Sophia Laurent's thundering voice filled the kitchen. She had returned earlier from Boston, and her face revealed controlled fury. "In my office. Now." The minutes that followed were tense. The team worked in silence, occasionally glancing at the closed office door. When it finally opened, Anthony exited with a red face, avoiding looking at anyone. "Jessica," called Sophia. "Come, please." In the elegant office with a view of the New York skyline, Sophia served 2 glasses of wine. "Do you know why I chose you for this program?" she asked, offering one of the glasses. Jessica shook her head, still processing the morning's events. "Because you remind me of myself 30 years ago. Talented, yes, but primarily resilient. When Ethan told me about you, about how you faced the accusations, I knew I had found my successor." "Successor?" Jessica almost choked on the wine. "Yes, I'm planning to retire in a few years. Le Soleil needs new blood, someone who respects tradition but isn't afraid to innovate. Sophia paused, her eyes shining. But first, I needed to be sure you would survive the sometimes toxic environment of high gastronomy. So, Anthony? A test. I didn't plan it, but when I realized his intentions, I decided to observe how you would handle the situation, and you impressed me once again. Jessica absorbed the information slowly as Sophia continued. As for Ethan, he's in New York. Jessica's heart skipped a beat. How? He arrived yesterday. He's reorganizing his business with New York investors. In fact, Sophia checked her elegant watch. He should be arriving for lunch in a few minutes. As if on cue, soft knocks sounded at the door. When it opened, the amber eyes that had haunted Jessica's dreams for the past few months met hers, and the world seemed to stop for a moment. Sophia's office seemed to have shrunk with Ethan's magnetic presence. He was thinner, with small lines of concern around his eyes, but his bearing still emanated the same elegance that had captured Jessica's attention months ago. "I'll leave you alone," said Sophia, rising with an enigmatic smile. "Jessica, you have an hour before lunch service." The silence that followed was dense with unspoken words. Ethan was the first to break it. "Your profiteroles are the talk of the town in New York." Jessica couldn't contain a smile. "Is that how we're going to start talking about profiteroles?" "Sorry," he ran his hand through his hair, a surprisingly vulnerable gesture. "I didn't know how to... Well, it's not easy to find the right words when you're in front of someone who you avoided for weeks," she completed, surprising herself with her frankness. Ethan sighed, sitting in the chair Sophia had vacated. "I didn't want you to see me like this, Jessica, with my empire crumbling, my reputation at stake. You were starting your journey here. You didn't need to carry my problems. And you didn't think I might want to choose for myself, that maybe I cared enough to... To what?" he interrupted her, his amber eyes intense. "To give up on your dreams? To return to Colorado and try to save a restaurant chain in crisis?" Jessica stood up, walking to the window. New York stretched before her, beautiful and imposing. "You know what I've learned these months here? That sometimes we need to lose something to find something greater. When I left Colorado, I thought I was just following a professional dream. But each new recipe I created, each technique I perfected, everything led me back to that moment in the storage room of the secret garden." Ethan approached, stopping a few steps from her. "The mouse moment?" he asked, a slight tone of amusement in his voice. "The moment someone saw beyond my insecurity," she turned to face him. "Someone who now hides behind his own." The distant sound of pots in the kitchen reminded them that the world continued turning out there, but in that office time seemed to have stopped. "I have a proposal for you," said Ethan finally. "The New York investors are interested in a merger, not just an investment. They want to transform my network into something new, more modern, more international. And," Jessica felt her heart accelerate, "and they were impressed with your creations. Sophia showed them your work, your development here. They want you as part of the project, developing a new line of restaurants that blend French tradition with contemporary American touches." Jessica blinked, stunned by the proposal. "But what about Le Soleil? Sophia talked about succession." "She knows about the proposal," Ethan smiled. "In fact, it was her idea. Sometimes you need to take a step back to take two forward," were her words. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I finally understood that I was wrong in trying to protect you by keeping my distance." "You don't need protection, Jessica. You never did. You need partnership, someone who believes in your potential as much as you do yourself." The clock on the wall relentlessly marked the passage of time, reminding Jessica of her commitments in the kitchen. But before she could respond, the door opened again. "Sorry for the interruption," said Sophia, "but I thought you'd like to know. Anthony has just resigned from the reality show. Apparently someone sent the production evidence of plagiarism." Jessica and Ethan exchanged surprised looks. "You..." she began. "No," he replied, "but I know someone who might have done it." Sophia smiled, her eyes gleaming with satisfaction. Let's say I have friends in interesting places. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need my sous chef in the kitchen, unless, of course, she has other plans for her future. Le Soleil's kitchen was in full activity when Jessica returned from Sophia's office. Her thoughts swirled like steam escaping from a pressure cooker, while her hands worked automatically preparing for lunch service. "You're different," observed Yuki, preparing a salmon with surgical precision. "Your eyes are shining." Jessica smiled, focusing on browning the vegetables for the appetizer. "Things are changing," she replied enigmatically. The service flowed with the precision of a well-rehearsed ballet. Jessica coordinated her station with renewed confidence, her mind divided between the dishes she prepared and the proposal that still echoed in her ears. During a brief pause, Sophia called her to taste a new sauce. "You know," began the French chef, "when I came to New York I had only one suitcase and many dreams, like you." "And now you're thinking of passing Le Soleil on," completed Jessica. "No, my dear. I'm thinking of expanding its legacy. A restaurant, however prestigious, is just a beginning. The real challenge is creating something that transcends walls." The sound of clinking glasses drew the attention of both. In the main room, Ethan was conversing with a group of businessmen, his animated gestures suggesting good news. "He fought. Hard to get where he is," continued Sophia. "Started washing dishes like many of us. Every penny invested, every restaurant opened, was with the sweat of his labor." "Why are you telling me this?" asked Jessica, though she already suspected. The answer: because sometimes we need to know the past to understand the future. Ethan isn't just proposing a business partnership, he's offering a chance to create something extraordinary. The afternoon was advancing when Ethan reappeared in the kitchen. His amber eyes found Jessica's as she was finalizing a trio of desserts. "The investors approved the project," he announced, his voice laden with contained enthusiasm. "They want to start immediately." Jessica felt the weight of expectations on her shoulders, but this time it wasn't a burden. It was an opportunity. "What if I say I need time?" "Time? To finish my training here, to learn everything I can from Sophia, to make sure that when we start this project I'll be prepared." Ethan's smile widened. "Does that mean you're considering the proposal?" "It means I understood something important," she replied, adjusting her apron with determination. "That sometimes the universe presents us not with one, but several paths, and that maybe we don't need to choose just one." Sophia, who had been discreetly observing the scene, approached. "Perhaps," she began with a knowing smile, "there's a way to reconcile everything. The development program lasts 3 more months. Enough time to finalize your training and participate in planning the new project." "And Le Soleil?" asked Jessica. "It will continue to be your home in New York, a place to experiment, create, evolve. The new restaurants will be an extension of that work, not a substitute." Ethan extended his hand, a formal gesture that carried unspoken promises. "Partners." Jessica looked at the extended hand, at the amber eyes that had first seen her potential, at the kitchen that had become her new home. With a confident smile, she shook his hand. "Partners." The New York autumn painted the streets with golden tones as Jessica walked hurriedly to another meeting with the investors. 3 weeks had passed since she accepted the partnership proposal, and each day brought new challenges and discoveries. In the elegant office in Midtown, Ethan was already waiting for her along with the American businessman. His eyes briefly met hers, conveying a silent message of support. "Miss Benson," began Mr. Wallace, the main investor, "your concepts for the new chain are interesting, but we have some concerns." Jessica took a deep breath, feeling the familiar cold in the pit of her stomach. "What kind of concerns?" "Well, fusing traditional French cuisine with American elements is risky. Our audience is conservative, traditionalist." "With all due respect," interrupted Jessica, her voice firm, "it was exactly this fusion that caught Sophia Laurent's attention, and it was this that brought renowned critics to Le Soleil in recent weeks." Ethan hid a smile as she continued. "Besides, we're not proposing a revolution, but an evolution. Each dish maintains the French essence, just elevated by subtle touches that make it unique. "Show them," said Ethan softly, indicating the folder Jessica was carrying. With precise gestures, she spread photographs of her latest experiments on the table. A duck à l'orange reinterpreted with American regional fruits. A millefeuille that incorporated products from the Pacific Northwest. A reinterpretation of the traditional coq au vin with American spices. This, she pointed to the images, is the future of gastronomy. It's not abandoning tradition, it's expanding it. It's showing that French cuisine is so strong that it can embrace new influences without losing its identity. The investors leaned over the photos, whispering among themselves. Mr. Wallace seemed especially interested in one of the dishes. "This," he pointed to an elaborate dessert. "What is it?" "A reinterpretation of Saint-Honoré," explained Jessica, her eyes shining. "The base maintains the traditional dough, but the cream was infused with premium American coffee and Pacific Northwest berries. The caramelized fruits are native to the eastern seaboard." A tense silence filled the room as the investors conferred in low voices. Ethan discreetly approached Jessica. "You were brilliant," he whispered. "We still don't know their answer," she replied, trying to control her anxiety. "The answer doesn't matter. What matters is that you believe in what you're doing, and so do I." Before Jessica could respond, Mr. Wallace cleared his throat, calling everyone's attention. "Miss Benson, Mr. Sullivan, after carefully considering the proposal..." The air seemed to become denser as everyone awaited the verdict. Jessica felt Ethan's hand lightly touch her arm, an almost imperceptible gesture of support. "We've decided not only to approve the project, but to expand it," announced Wallace with a smile. "We want 3 restaurants, not just one. New York, Chicago, and San Francisco." Jessica felt her legs weaken. 3 restaurants? It was more than they had initially planned. "With one condition," continued Wallace. "We want you to be the executive chef of all 3 establishments." The world seemed to spin for a moment. Executive chef of 3 restaurants? It was an enormous responsibility, a giant leap in her career. She began, but Ethan gently interrupted. "She accepts," he said, his amber eyes fixed on hers. "But she also has a condition." Jessica stared at him, surprised. What condition would that be? "Sophia Laurent needs to be a consultant for the project," he completed, winking at Jessica. "Her experience will be invaluable to ensure the success of the restaurants." The investors exchanged approving looks. Sophia's participation, one of the most respected chefs in America, was an additional guarantee of quality. "Well then, it's decided," declared Wallace, standing to shake both their hands. "Welcome to the future of American gastronomy." As the investors left, Jessica remained motionless, still processing everything that had happened. Ethan approached, his familiar perfume bringing a sense of comfort. "How did you know?" she asked. "About Sophia?" "Because I know you," he answered simply. "You would never abandon your mentor, just as she never abandoned you." Le Soleil was closed to the public that night, but the kitchen buzzed with activity. Jessica, Sophia, and their team were preparing a special dinner to present the concepts of the new restaurants to the main food critics in America. "Nervous, little chef?" asked Sophia, observing Jessica finishing one of the main dishes. "A bit," she admitted, meticulously adjusting the presentation. "It's different from anything I've ever done." "No," corrected Sophia with a smile. "It's exactly what you've always done, cooking with your heart." The kitchen door opened and Ethan entered, accompanied by Jason Wallace, Mr. Wallace's son and the architect responsible for the design of the new restaurants. "Jessica," called Ethan, "Jason brought the final plans for your approval." On a side table, Jason spread elaborate drawings showing modern and elegant kitchens, each adapted to reflect the fusion of cultures that Jessica proposed. "The kitchens are the heart of everything," explained Jason in his melodious voice. "I designed each one thinking about the workflow you described." Jessica studied the drawings, impressed with the attention to detail. Each station had been designed to maximize efficiency without sacrificing creativity. "It's perfect," she declared. but a shadow of concern crossed her face. "What is it?" asked Ethan, noticing her expression. "It's just 3 restaurants. How will I ensure that quality is maintained in all of them?" Sophia approached, placing a hand on her shoulder. "The same way I maintain Le Soleil, by training people, sharing knowledge, building a team that shares your vision." "And you won't be alone," added Ethan. "I'll be by your side every step of the way." The moment was interrupted by the oven timer. Jessica ran to remove a batch of artisanal breads whose aroma quickly filled the kitchen. "My God," exclaimed Jason, closing his eyes to appreciate the fragrance. "This is naturally fermented bread with American grains," explained Jessica. "Each restaurant will have its own bakery, producing unique breads that complement the menu." The night advanced, and preparations for the special dinner entered their final phase. The team worked in perfect harmony, like a well-rehearsed orchestra. Ethan observed Jessica in her element, commanding the kitchen with a mixture of firmness and gentleness that was her trademark. His amber eyes shone with something beyond professional. "Admiration." "You know," he said softly when he managed a moment alone with her, "when I first saw you jumping scared because of a mouse, I never imagined we would get here." Jessica smiled, remembering that day that now seemed so distant. "The mouse that changed our lives," she joked. "We should put it in the logo of the restaurants." "Why not?" replied Ethan, surprising her. "A symbol of the luck that united us, something discreet, elegant." Before Jessica could respond, Sophia called everyone's attention. "My friends, the critics have started to arrive. It's showtime." Jessica took a deep breath, adjusted her uniform one last time, and exchanged a meaningful look with Ethan. She was about to present to the world her vision of a gastronomy without borders, where tradition and innovation danced in perfect harmony. "Ready?" asked Ethan, offering his arm. "Ready," she replied, accepting the gesture, and together they walked toward the hall where their future awaited them. The following months passed in a whirlwind of activities. Jessica divided her time between Le Soleil, where she continued her learning with Sophia, and the endless planning meetings for the new restaurants. The first of them, named Essence, was about to be inaugurated in New York. "The visual concept turned out even better than we imagined," commented Jason, guiding Jessica and Ethan through the almost ready space. The walls in soft tones were decorated with artistic panels that blended French and American elements, and the open kitchen allowed customers to see the magic happening. "And this," Jason pointed to a discreet detail in the golden logo at the entrance, "is our little lucky friend." Jessica smiled to see the stylized silhouette of the mouse, so elegantly incorporated into the design that only those who knew the story could recognize it. It was a constant reminder of how small moments could change destinies. "The press is eager for the inauguration," commented Ethan, checking his phone. "All reservations for the first month are already sold out." Jessica felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but it was a welcome weight. Her team, carefully selected and trained, was already sharp after weeks of rehearsals and tests. "Chef," called Thomas, her new sous chef, emerging from the kitchen with a worried expression. "We have a problem with the wild mushroom supplier." "What happened?" "The harvest was affected by the weather. We won't have enough for the inauguration menu." Ethan observed with admiration as Jessica processed the information without losing her composure. She had grown so much in recent months, her confidence now rivaling her talent. "Call Sophia," she instructed after a moment of reflection. "She knows a supplier in upstate New York who cultivates organic varieties. Meanwhile, let's adapt the menu. That idea we had for the heart of palm risotto. It's time to put it into practice." The ability to transform obstacles into opportunities was one of the characteristics that most impressed Ethan. As he watched her in action, coordinating her team with precision and creativity, he felt something grow in his chest, a feeling he could no longer ignore. "You're different," he commented later, when they finally had a moment of pause. They were in the restaurant's small office, surrounded by papers, fabric samples for napkins, and endless to-do lists. Jessica looked up from the notes she was making. "Different, Auna. More complete. As if you found your place in the world." Jessica set down her pen, considering his words. You know what's funny? When I came to New York, I thought I was leaving everything behind, but actually, I was walking towards something bigger. And do you regret it? He asked, his voice soft. Coming. Here? Never. Accepting this project, even less. She paused, a smile playing on her lips. Jumping into your arms that day? Maybe a little bit. Ethan laughed, a rich sound that warmed the room. That was the luckiest moment of my life, even if I didn't know it at the time. Jessica's phone vibrated, another message from Sophia with details about the new mushroom supplier. But before she could respond, Ethan placed his hand over hers. Jessica, he began, his tone serious, I need to tell you something. Her heart raced. There was an intensity in his gaze that made her hold her breath. The investors, they want to expand the project even more, not just America. They're talking about London, Madrid, even Tokyo. Jessica felt the world spin. But how? We already have 3 restaurants in progress. They saw something that I saw from the beginning. Your potential is unlimited. Ethan hesitated for a moment, but there's more. More? They want us to do this together. Not just as business partners, but as a unified brand. Your creativity, my management experience. The air between them became charged with unspoken possibilities. Jessica could feel her heart beating against her ribs, a disjointed symphony of hope and fear. And what do you think? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. Ethan stood up, walking to the window that overlooked the streets of New York. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold that rivaled his eyes. Ethan's answer took longer than Jessica expected. He continued looking out the window as if searching for the right words in the streets of New York. I think, he finally began, turning to face her, that some opportunities are like those perfect recipes. They appear when we least expect and change everything we thought we knew about cuisine and about life. Jessica stood up, approaching him. The woody perfume that had intrigued her so much at their first meeting was still there, now mixed with notes of spices from the kitchen. Ethan, she began, but was interrupted by knocks on the door. Chef, it was Thomas again. The wine suppliers have arrived for the final tasting. The moment broke like a delicate eggshell. Duty called, as always happened in the world of gastronomy. Go, said Ethan softly. We'll continue this conversation later. The afternoon transformed into a succession of wine tastings, final menu adjustments, and meetings with the team. Each selected bottle, each finalized dish, each detail settled, brought Essence closer to its grand opening. This Bordeaux, commented the sommelier, offering a glass to Jessica, pairs perfectly with your rack of lamb with American spices. She tasted the wine, letting its flavors dance on her tongue. It was truly an exceptional combination, the French terroir complementing the exotic notes of her dish. Approved, she declared, making notes on her clipboard. We'll need... A movement at the door caught her attention. Sophia had arrived, carrying a small box. I brought something for you, announced the French chef, her eyes shining with satisfaction. An inauguration gift. Inside the box, Jessica found a new apron made of fine Italian fabric. Embroidered in gold was her name, followed by the words Executive Chef Essence. Sophia, No tears, interrupted Sophia with a smile. Save your emotion for the inauguration speech. Speech? Jessica felt a chill in her stomach. What speech? Well, you didn't expect to open one of the most anticipated restaurants in New York without saying a few words, did you? Ethan, who had silently approached, laughed at Jessica's panicked expression. Don't worry, he said. You've faced critics, saboteurs, and mice. A little speech will be a piece of cake. Easy for you to say, she muttered, but a smile played on her lips. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity. The team worked in perfect sync like a well-rehearsed orchestra, preparing everything for the big day. It was already night when they finally finished. The kitchen gleamed. Impeccable, ready for its first service. Jessica remained there alone, absorbing the silence that preceded the storm. $1 for your thoughts, Ethan's voice surprised her. Just one? She joked. Inflation is high, you know. He approached, stopping beside her. How about we continue our conversation from this afternoon? I know a small cafe that should still be open. Jessica looked at the clock. It was late. She was exhausted. And tomorrow would be one of the most important days of her life. But there was something in Ethan's amber eyes, a promise that some conversations couldn't wait. With one condition, she replied, removing her apron. No talking about work. His smile lit up the kitchen more than all the fluorescent lights. Deal. It's about time we talked about other things, don't you think? As they walked through the New York night, Jessica felt a certainty grow in her chest. Sometimes the best dishes came from the most unexpected combinations, and sometimes the best moments in life did too. The small cafe on Sullivan Street was almost empty at that hour. Jessica and Ethan chose a discreet table in the back, away from the windows that faced the busy street. So, she began, after the waiter brought their coffees, no talking about work. Ethan smiled, his amber eyes reflecting the soft light of the environment. True, although it's difficult to think of another subject when you're about to make history in American gastronomy. Hey, protested Jessica, laughing. You promised. Sorry, he raised his hands in surrender, but before we definitely change the subject, I need to tell you something important. Jessica felt her heart accelerate. There was a seriousness in his tone that made her hold her breath. Remember when I first found you at the secret garden? You were so focused on your clipboard that you didn't even notice me enter. Until a certain mouse decided to make the introductions, she completed, smiling at the memory. Exactly. At that moment when you jumped into my arms, he paused, his eyes fixed on hers. Something changed, not just in your life, but in mine too. The coffee cooled forgotten between them as Ethan continued. I was lost, Jessica. My restaurants were in crisis. My passion for gastronomy had transformed into numbers and spreadsheets. And then suddenly there you were, frightened by a mouse, but with eyes that shone when talking about a simple pie. Jessica felt her cheeks burn. Ethan. Let me finish, he asked softly. When I tasted your pie that day, it wasn't just the perfect technique or the unique flavor that impressed me. It was the passion that I could feel in each layer, each detail. You reminded me why I fell in love with gastronomy in the first place. The pie, silence that followed was laden with emotion. Outside, New York continued its nocturnal dance of lights and shadows, oblivious to the intimate moment unfolding in the small cafe. And now? Asked Jessica, her voice almost a whisper. Now, he replied, reaching for her hand on the table. I want more than a business partnership. I want to build something special, not just in the restaurants, but... Jessica's cell phone vibrated, violently, interrupting the moment. It was Sophia. My dear, the French chef's voice sounded urgent. We have a problem with tomorrow's inauguration. Jessica felt her stomach sink. What happened? The critic from the New York Times moved up his visit. He's dining right now at Le Soleil and just mentioned he'll be coming to Essence's inauguration tomorrow. But we weren't expecting him until next week. Exactly. And there's more. He's particularly interested in the fusion of cultures we promised. Said he'll dedicate an entire page of the newspaper to your cuisine. Ethan, noticing the tension in Jessica's expression, gently squeezed her hand. Sophia, said Jessica after a moment of reflection, I need to go back to the restaurant. Now. No, protested Sophia. You need to rest for tomorrow. I won't. Be able to rest knowing I need to adjust the menu. The Times critic isn't known for his kindness toward new concepts. Ethan was already signaling to the waiter, asking for the check. I'm going with you, he declared. But our conversation can wait, he smiled, that smile that always made her heart skip a beat. Some things are better said at the right moment. Back at Essence, the kitchen soon came to life again. Jessica, Ethan, and the on-duty team worked until dawn, refining dishes, adjusting seasonings, ensuring that each element of the menu told the story she wanted to tell. As they worked side by side, Jessica realized that even without words, some truths revealed themselves naturally, in the way their movements synchronized in the kitchen, how he anticipated her needs, how their gazes met in moments of doubt or triumph. The sun was already rising when they finally finished. The kitchen was impeccable, the menu perfectly adjusted and every detail checked twice. "A few hours until the inauguration," commented Ethan, watching Jessica store her notes. "Do you think you can rest a bit?" She smiled, exhausted but satisfied, with one condition. "Which?" "Promise we'll finish that conversation." The hours preceding Essence's inauguration passed in a whirlwind of activity. Jessica, after a few hours of rest, was back in the kitchen, coordinating the final preparations with renewed energy. "The flower arrangements have arrived," announced Thomas, entering the kitchen. "And the press is already gathering outside." Jessica took a deep breath, adjusting her new apron, Sophia's gift. The team worked in perfect sync, each focused on their function like musicians in an orchestra. "Chef," called Amelia, one of the pastry chefs, "would you like to taste the last batch of macarons?" The small, colorful sweets were a perfect fusion, traditional American flavors presented in the most classic of French forms. Jessica tasted one, letting the textures and flavors dance on her tongue. "Perfect," she declared, "exactly as I imagined." Ethan appeared at the kitchen door, impeccable in his Italian suit. His amber eyes immediately found hers, as if they were magnets. "The first guests arrive in an hour," he informed. "The Times critic has already confirmed his table." Jessica nodded, trying to control her nervousness. It wasn't just a restaurant she was inaugurating, it was a dream, a vision of what gastronomy could be when barriers were broken down and traditions merged into something new and exciting. "Oh, and there's one more thing," continued Ethan, a mysterious smile on his lips. "There's someone who wants to see you." Before Jessica could ask who it was, a familiar figure appeared at the door, Peter, her former colleague from the secret garden. "Surprise!" he exclaimed, opening his arms. "Peter!" Jessica ran to hug him. "But how—" "Ethan invited me," he explained, "said you would need familiar faces today." The gesture deeply touched Jessica. It was typical of Ethan, thinking of the small details that made all the difference. The hour of inauguration arrived faster than seemed possible. The restaurant was dazzling. Soft lights highlighted the decorative elements that merged cultures. The aroma coming from the kitchen was irresistible, and the place's energy was palpable. "It's time for your speech," whispered Sophia, who had arrived to give moral support. Jessica ascended the small improvised stage, feeling dozens of expectant gazes upon her. Journalists, critics, renowned chefs, and investors all awaited her words. "When I came to New York," she began, her voice firm despite her nervousness, "I thought I was leaving everything behind, but I discovered that sometimes we need to distance ourselves from our roots to truly understand their value." Her eyes found Ethan's in the crowd, and she continued with more confidence. "Essence isn't just a restaurant. It's a celebration of possibilities. It's proof that tradition and innovation aren't opposites, but partners in an eternal dance. Each dish we'll serve here carries a story, of France, of America, and of the magical encounter between these two worlds." The speech was received with warm applause. The service began, and soon the kitchen was in full activity. Jessica moved between stations, supervising, adjusting, ensuring that each dish that left was perfect. The Times critic was one of the first to be served. Through the kitchen door, Jessica observed him taste each dish with meticulous attention, making notes in his small notebook. "He smiled," whispered Thomas after serving dessert. "Twice." The night advanced and the compliments didn't stop coming. Renowned chefs visited the kitchen to congratulate the team, critics made a point of expressing their approval, and customers sent messages of gratitude. In a moment of pause, Ethan managed to take Jessica to the small office in the back. "So," he said, closing the door to muffle the noise from the kitchen, "I think now we can finish that conversation." The small office of Essence seemed even smaller with the tension that hung in the air. Jessica observed Ethan, her heart beating so hard that she was sure he could hear it. "You know," he began, his voice soft, "I spent months trying to find the perfect moment for this conversation. First I thought it would be too early, then came the negotiations, the renovation, the inauguration. And now?" asked Jessica, her voice almost a whisper. "Now I realize there is no perfect moment. There's only the right moment." He took a step toward her. "And the right moment is when we can no longer keep what we feel." A knock on the door interrupted them. "Chef," Thomas's voice sounded urgent. "The Times critic wants to speak with you personally." Jessica closed her eyes for a moment, breathing deeply. "I need to go," said Ethan softly. "This time, I promise I won't leave the conversation unfinished." The critic was waiting in the main hall, his expression unreadable. He was a tall, thin man, known for destroying reputations with a few well-placed words. "Miss Benson," he began in perfect English, "I would like to express something important." Jessica felt her stomach knot. Her entire professional future could depend on this man's next words. "In 40 years writing about gastronomy," he continued, "I've learned to recognize when something truly special emerges on the culinary scene. What you've created here," he made a dramatic pause, "is revolutionary." The air suddenly seemed lighter. Jessica could hardly believe what she was hearing. "The way you fused French techniques with American flavors. It's brilliant. It's not a forced mixture. It's a harmonious dance between two cultures. My congratulations." The critic's words spread quickly through the restaurant. Soon champagne was being served, toasts were made, and Essence vibrated with an even more intense energy. Sophia appeared beside Jessica, her eyes shining with pride. "I knew you would succeed, little chef, but now there's someone waiting for you at the back of the restaurant." In the small herb garden they had installed at the back of Essence, Ethan was waiting. The light of the New York moon gave a special glow to his amber eyes. "So," he smiled, "where were we?" "You were saying something about not being able to keep what you feel anymore," answered Jessica, her heart accelerating again. "Ah, yes," he approached, taking her hands in his. "Jessica, when I met you, I was lost. My restaurants were in crisis. I had lost my passion for what I did. And then you appeared, literally falling into my arms." A laugh escaped from Jessica's lips, breaking some of the tension. "You reminded me why I fell in love with gastronomy," he continued, "and in the process made me realize it was possible to fall in love again, not just with cuisine, but..." The tie. Sound of applause coming from the restaurant interrupted the moment once more. But this time, Ethan didn't let the opportunity escape. With a smooth movement, he pulled Jessica closer. "I love you," he declared simply. "And I'm not talking about business or cuisine or restaurants. I'm talking about you, Jessica. About how your eyes shine when you create a new dish. About how you treat your team with respect and care. About how you never give up on your dreams." Jessica felt tears forming in her eyes. All the interruptions, all the almost lost moments, had led to this. In the herb garden of her own restaurant under the starry sky of New York, with the distant sound of celebration in the background. "I love you too," she replied, her voice choked with emotion. "And I'm not talking about business either." The kiss that followed was both soft and intense, like the best of desserts, sweet in just the right measure, with complex notes of flavors that complemented each other perfectly. When they separated, both were smiling. In the restaurant, the party continued, but there in that small garden a new chapter was beginning. The morning after the successful inauguration brought not only the first positive reviews in the newspapers, but also a wave of reservations for the coming months. Essence had become overnight the most talked about restaurant in New York. "Look at this," said Thomas, showing Jessica the first page of the New York Times. The critic had dedicated not just one, but 2 entire pages to the restaurant, with the title "A Gastronomic Revolution in New York." Jessica was reading the article with a smile on her face when she felt strong arms embrace her from behind. Ethan's familiar scent enveloped her, bringing memories of the previous night in the garden. "Good morning, chef," he whispered in her ear. "Good morning," she replied, turning to face him. "You arrived early." "Actually," he smiled, "I have a surprise for you. But first, breakfast?" In the small cafe near the restaurant where they had tried to have their decisive conversation the night before, Ethan presented Jessica with his plans for the future. "The investors don't just want to expand to other cities," he explained. "They want to create a culinary school, a place where chefs from around the world can learn the art of culinary fusion that you created." Jessica almost choked on her coffee. "A school?" "Yes, and they want you to be the creative director. Sophia has already agreed to be a consultant for the project." The idea was ambitious, a center of culinary excellence that would combine traditional techniques with multicultural innovation. The campus would be built in the outskirts of New York, with state-of-the-art facilities and renowned professors. "But what about the other restaurants?" asked Jessica. "We'll continue with the expansion as planned, but the school will be our legacy, Jessica. A place where other young chefs can find their own culinary voice, just as you found yours." The project was perfect, a way to multiply not just techniques and flavors, but also values and vision. Jessica could clearly see the potential to transform lives through gastronomy. "There's one more thing," continued Ethan, reaching for something in his pocket. "This is for you." It was a small blue velvet box. Inside, a delicate gold ring with small stones that resembled the color of his eyes. "It's not a marriage proposal." Yet, he smiled, "it's a promise that no matter how many restaurants we open, how many schools we create, or how many dreams we realize, we'll do it all together." Jessica felt tears forming in her eyes as Ethan placed the ring on her finger. It was more than jewelry. It was a symbol of how much their lives had changed since that first encounter at the secret garden. "You know," she said, admiring how the ring sparkled under the New York sunlight, "I never properly thanked that little mouse." Ethan laughed. "Maybe we should adopt one as the school mascot." "Why not?" smiled Jessica. "After all, it was he who taught us that sometimes the best ingredients in life come in the most unexpected forms." Back at Essence, the team was already in full activity, preparing for another day of service. But now there was something different in the air. It wasn't just a restaurant, it was the beginning of something much bigger. "Chef," called Amelia, "the new interns have arrived. They want to meet the person who's revolutionizing American gastronomy." Jessica looked at Ethan, who nodded encouragingly. Together, they walked to the kitchen, ready to begin another chapter of their story. A story that, like the best recipes, would continue to evolve and surprise with each new day. The following months passed in a whirlwind of activities. While Essence consolidated itself as one of the most prestigious restaurants in New York, Jessica and Ethan divided their time between supervising the construction of the school and planning the next restaurants. The campus of the future culinary. Fusion School was taking shape in the outskirts of New York. In an old vineyard property, architects were transforming historic buildings into modern learning spaces, preserving the classic American essence while incorporating contemporary elements. "The training kitchens will be here," explained Jason, guiding Jessica and Ethan through the site. "Each will be equipped for a specific type of cuisine, but all can be adapted for different styles." Jessica observed the facilities under construction in wonder. Large windows would allow abundant natural light, and the open design would encourage collaboration among students. "And this area?" she asked, pointing to a particularly spacious space. "Ah," smiled Jason, "this will be the experimental kitchen, a laboratory where students can create and test new recipes. It was inspired by the story of a certain chef who used to experiment with recipes in the early hours at her old restaurant." Ethan gently squeezed Jessica's hand, both remembering the days at the secret garden that had changed their lives. "But the most special," continued Jason, guiding them to the garden, "is here." An extensive green area stretched before them, with beds already prepared for different types of herbs and vegetables. In the center, a small circular construction drew attention. "This will be the heart of the school," explained Jason, "a space for outdoor classes, cultivation demonstrations, and of course a place for students to gather and exchange experiences." Jessica approached the construction, noticing a subtle detail in the design. Small silhouettes of stylized mice, delicately incorporated into the decorative pattern. "I couldn't resist," confessed Jason with a smile. "After all, every great chef needs a bit of luck, right?" The afternoon advanced as they discussed the final details of the project. Sophia had arrived for the meeting, bringing her own suggestions for the school's curriculum. "The most important thing," emphasized the French chef, "is that we maintain the balance between tradition and innovation. Students need to understand the classic foundations before they begin to experiment with fusions." "As you did with me," smiled Jessica. "Exactly. And look where you've come." The sun was beginning to set when they finished the visit. On the way back to New York, Jessica remained thoughtful, observing the American rural landscape through the car window. $1 for your thoughts," said Ethan, repeating the phrase that had become a private joke between them. "I was thinking about how life takes turns," she replied. "Less than a year ago, I was just a nervous sous chef in a restaurant in Colorado. Now you're revolutionizing American gastronomy and about to lead one of the most innovative culinary schools in the world," he completed with pride. "It's an enormous responsibility," admitted Jessica. "And that's why you're the perfect person for it," intervened Sophia from the front seat. "Because you understand that gastronomy isn't just about food, it's about transformation." Arriving at Essence, they found Thomas waiting with exciting news. The restaurant had just received its first Michelin star in record time. "And this is just the beginning," declared Ethan, embracing Jessica amid the team's celebration. "Just wait until we see what our future students will create." That night, after service, Jessica found a small gift in her office, a handcrafted notebook with her initials engraved in gold. Inside, a note from Ethan. "For you to record all the recipes you'll still create, all the lives you'll transform, and all the dreams we'll realize together. With love, E." Flipping through the blank pages, Jessica smiled, imagining the stories that were yet to come. Like the best of recipes, her life had transformed into something much more special than she had ever imagined, and the best was just beginning. Autumn had arrived in New York when the Culinary Fusion School finally opened its doors. The campus gleamed under the golden morning sun as the first students arrived, their eyes shining with the same passion that Jessica recognized from her own apprentice days. "Ready for the opening speech?" asked Ethan, adjusting his tie while observing the packed auditorium through a crack in the door. Jessica took a deep breath, instinctively touching the ring on her finger, her lucky charm in recent months. "Almost, I just need a minute." Sophia approached, elegant in her chef's uniform. "Remember, little chef, you've already made history. Now it's time to help others write their own stories." The auditorium was filled not only with students, but also journalists, renowned chefs, and personalities from the gastronomic world. Essence had become an international phenomenon, and the inauguration of the school was one of the most anticipated events of the year. Jessica took the stage, her heart beating strongly, but her hands steady. She looked at the audience and began. "A few years ago in a kitchen in Colorado, a young sous chef trembled before a small mouse. At that moment, she didn't know that that scare would change her life forever." Soft laughter rippled through the auditorium. Gastronomy is made of moments like this, seemingly insignificant, which transform into turning points. Each of you is here because you had your own moment of epiphany, your own encounter with the magic that happens when simple ingredients transform into something extraordinary. Her eyes found Ethan's in the front row, and she continued with more confidence. "This school isn't just a place to learn techniques or recipes. It's a space to discover your own culinary voice, to understand that tradition and innovation aren't opposites, but partners in an eternal dance. Here you'll learn that the best creations are born when we have the courage to mix the unexpected." Sophia smiled proudly as Jessica continued. "Each of you brings a unique story, flavors from your own cultures and experiences. Our mission is to help you transform these stories into dishes that move, surprise, and connect people." The speech was received with warm applause, Soon after, the students were conducted in groups to see the facilities. Jessica observed with satisfaction their amazed expressions as they discovered the state-of-the-art kitchens, the herb garden, and the experimental laboratory. At the end of the day, as the sun set over the campus, Jessica, Ethan, and Sophia shared a bottle of champagne in the circular garden. "To the future of gastronomy," toasted Sophia. "To new beginnings," added Ethan, his amber eyes fixed on Jessica. "To all the lucky mice in the world," completed Jessica with a smile. As the stars began to dot the New York sky, Jessica reflected on her journey. From the secret garden to essence, from insecure sous chef to director of a revolutionary school, each step had been an essential ingredient in the recipe of her life. Ethan embraced her from behind, both observing the last students crossing the campus. "Happy?" he asked. "More than happy," she replied. "Fulfilled and eager for what's ahead." "And what's ahead?" he teased. Jessica smiled, turning to face him. "That depends. Are you ready for a few more culinary adventures?" "With you? Always," he replied, sealing the promise with a kiss. In the garden of the Culinary Fusion School, under the starry sky of New York, the future unfolded like a perfect recipe, full of possibilities, promises, and of course, a pinch of magic. A year had passed since the inauguration of the Culinary Fusion School. The campus now pulsated with life, filled with students from all corners of the world. The aroma of different cuisines mingled in the corridors, creating a symphony of flavors that perfectly represented Jessica's vision. In her office overlooking the herb garden, she reviewed the final details for the school's first graduation. The inaugural class was about to graduate, and each student had developed their own unique style of culinary fusion. "Chef Jessica?" called Lisa, one of her most promising students. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" "Of course, come in," replied Jessica, recognizing in the student's trembling hands the same insecurity she herself had felt at the beginning of her journey. "It's about my final project," began Lisa. "I'm thinking of mixing French techniques with Vietnamese cuisine, but I'm afraid of being too bold." Jessica smiled, remembering her own doubts when she began experimenting with American and French fusions. "You know, Lisa, sometimes the greatest successes come precisely when we dare to be different." The conversation was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. It was Ethan, carrying a small mysterious box. "Sorry for the interruption," he smiled, "but I needed to show this to you, Jessica." Lisa discreetly said goodbye, leaving them alone. Ethan placed the box on the desk and carefully opened it. Inside was a perfect chocolate replica of the first pie that Jessica had created at the secret garden. "It's for the graduation ceremony," he explained. "I thought it would be a perfect symbol to inspire the students, the pie that started it all." Jessica felt tears forming in her eyes. The pie wasn't just a dessert, it was the materialization of her journey, the first step of an adventure that had completely transformed her life. "And there's more," continued Ethan, his amber eyes shining with excitement. "The investors just approved the expansion. We're going to open 3 more schools in the next 2 years, one in London, one in Tokyo, and another in Denver." Denver? Jessica could hardly believe it. "We're taking the school to Colorado." "I thought it would be perfect," he smiled. "A return to your roots, but now with all the experience and knowledge you've gained." The sound of laughter and animated conversations came from the garden. Through the window, Jessica could see her students practicing herb cultivation techniques with Sophia, who had become a beloved mentor to all. "You know," said Jessica, intertwining her fingers with Ethan's, "when I ran from that mouse at the secret garden, I never imagined I'd be here today. And I never imagined I'd find the love of my life because of a bold rodent," he joked. The phone rang. It was Thomas, now executive chef at Essence, with exciting news. The restaurant had just received its 2nd Michelin star. "One more reason to celebrate," declared Ethan. "What do you think of a special dinner tonight? I have a surprise planned." Jessica raised an eyebrow, intrigued. In recent months, Ethan had developed the habit of preparing special surprises that always ended up being memorable moments. "What kind of surprise?" the kind that involves a small garden, a different ring than the one you already have, and a very important question, he replied with a mysterious smile. Jessica's heart skipped a beat. She knew that look. It was the same one he had when he proposed the restaurant partnership, when he presented the idea of the school, when he gave her first promise ring. And this time, he continued, I promise there will be no interruptions. No surprise critics, kitchen emergencies, or last-minute meetings. Just the two of us, under the stars of New York, writing the next chapter of our story. The garden of the Culinary Fusion School was illuminated by hundreds of small lights, transforming the space into a magical setting. Jessica walked hand in hand with Ethan, her heart racing with anticipation of the moment to come. In the center of the circular garden, a table had been exquisitely prepared, every detail carefully planned. The candles flickered gently, creating dancing shadows on the ivy-covered walls. "Recognize the menu?" asked Ethan, pulling out a chair for her. Jessica examined the dishes before her, emotion growing in her chest as she recognized each item. It was a perfect recreation of all the important moments in their story. The pie that had caught his attention at the secret garden, the first dish she created at Le Soleil, the dessert from Essence's inauguration. "Each flavor tells a part of our story," explained Ethan, serving a glass of champagne. "But tonight is about our future." With a gentle gesture, he knelt beside her, removing a small velvet box from his pocket. The ring inside it shone as brightly as his amber eyes. "Jessica Benson," he began, his voice laden with emotion, "you've transformed my life in ways I never imagined possible. You made me rediscover my passion for gastronomy, taught me that sometimes we need to get lost to find ourselves, and showed me that love, like the best of recipes, needs courage to try something new." Silent tears ran down Jessica's face as he continued, "I want to spend the rest of my life creating new recipes with you, not just in the kitchen, but in life. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, her smile shining brighter than all the lights in the garden. As Ethan slid the ring onto her finger, applause and cheers erupted from all sides. Sophia, Thomas, Peter, and the entire school staff emerged from their hiding places in the garden, all complicit in the surprise. "We couldn't let you celebrate alone," declared Sophia, embracing the couple. "After all, we're all one big family now." The night transformed into a spontaneous celebration. Students and teachers joined the party, each bringing a dish that represented their own journey at the school. The circular garden, symbol of the union between tradition and innovation, witnessed the birth of yet another special chapter. "You know what's most amazing?" reflected Jessica later, when they finally had a moment alone. "Everything started with a scare, a mouse, and a pie. And it will continue with many adventures," completed Ethan. "The school in Denver, the new restaurants, our life together. Our own recipe for happiness," she smiled. The sun was beginning to rise on the horizon, painting the New York sky with shades of pink and gold. In the garden of the Culinary Fusion School, Jessica and Ethan shared more than a moment. They shared a future filled with possibilities, flavors, and love. Because sometimes, the best stories begin with a small scare and end with great joy. And like any good recipe, the secret lies not just in the ingredients, but in the love with which they are combined. The autumn wind rustled through the trees surrounding the Culinary Fusion School as Jessica adjusted her chef's coat. Today marked the graduation of their first class, a milestone that filled her with both pride and nostalgia. 60 students from around the world had completed their training, each developing a unique fusion style that reflected their personal journeys. "Nervous?" asked Ethan, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "A little," she admitted, accepting the steaming cup. "It feels like watching our children leave the nest." "I know," he smiled, his amber eyes warm with understanding. "But think of all the kitchens around the world that will soon be transformed by their talents." The graduation ceremony was held in the circular garden, now in full bloom despite the season. Each student presented their signature dish to an audience of family members, renowned chefs and food journalists. As Jessica watched them explain their creations with confidence and passion, she couldn't help but feel that something truly special had been born here. "And now," announced Sophia, who had flown in from New York specifically for the occasion, "I'd like to invite our founder and creative director, Jessica Benson, to say a few words." As Jessica took her place at the podium, she looked out at the sea of faces, the students who had trusted her vision, the team that had worked tirelessly to make it a reality, and Ethan, whose love and partnership had made everything possible. "When we opened this school," she began, "we had a dream of creating a place where culinary traditions could meet, blend, and evolve. A place where techniques passed down through generations could find new expressions in contemporary interpretations." She paused, emotion momentarily catching in her throat. "But what we've created here is so much more than that. Together we've built a community, a family united by our love for food and belief in its power to connect people across cultures, languages, and borders." As her speech concluded, Jessica invited each graduate to come forward and receive a small silver pin shaped like a mouse, the school's unofficial mascot and symbol of the unexpected beginnings that often lead to extraordinary destinations. Later that evening, as the celebration continued under the stars, Ethan led Jessica to a quiet corner of the garden, a champagne flute in each hand. "I have news," he said, his expression a mixture of excitement and solemnity. "The London school is ready. Construction finished 2 weeks ahead of schedule." "That's wonderful," she replied, taking a sip of the crisp champagne. "And there's more," he continued. "The investors want us to consider a completely new concept, not just culinary schools and restaurants, but a scholarship program for underprivileged youth with culinary talent." Jessica's eyes widened. "Seriously, that would be amazing. We could change so many lives." "I knew you'd be excited," Ethan laughed, pulling her close. "It's exactly the kind of project that captures your heart, combining excellence with opportunity." As they stood together in the garden that had witnessed so many important moments in their journey, Jessica realized how far they had come from that first startled moment in the secret garden. What had begun as a simple pie had grown into an international culinary movement, touching lives and transforming careers. "You know what I was thinking?" she said, watching their students celebrate. "Our wedding should be here in this garden. It's where everything important happens for us." Ethan's smile was radiant as he kissed her forehead. "I was hoping you'd say that. Spring, perhaps, when the cherry blossoms are in bloom." "Perfect," she agreed. "A celebration of new beginnings, just like everything else in our story." As night fell over the Culinary Fusion School, stars appearing one by one in the velvet sky, Jessica and Ethan remained in the garden, planning their future, a future as rich and complex as the flavors they had dedicated their lives to creating. Because, in the end, the recipe for a meaningful life wasn't so different from the recipe for an extraordinary dish.